So good evening, everyone. My name is Brenda Reyes, and I work for HealthConnect One. I want to welcome everyone to this IBLCE information webinar for today from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central Time today. For those of you that are new to HealthConnect One, our mission is we are a national leader in advancing respectful community-based peer-to-peer support for pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, and early parenting. Our vision is to see every baby and mother and family thrive in a healthy community. We work to achieve this vision through an equity-focused approach, supporting the first 1,000 days for birthing families. I will be facilitating this webinar along with my colleague, Eusebia Flores, who is a project manager here at HealthConnect One, and she will be assisting with any technical issues that you might have. So feel free to use the chat box to connect with us. Again, this webinar is currently being recorded, so you are in only listen only mode. Just this helps with the quality of the recording, the information that will be shared. We encourage you to use the chat feature to make sure that you put any comments in there, any questions that you might have. Feel free to raise your hands. Maybe I may be able to unmute you. And again, use the chat box for any technical issues that you might be having. Make sure this also recording will be available for folks who are not able to join us or who are not able to stay throughout the whole webinar. We're very excited to be presenting this webinar at HealthConnect One, and we're very excited to have a wonderful group of panelists who will be joining us and being able to provide the information to our community. So I would like to introduce Andrea Serrano, who is Program Director at Reaching Our Sisters Everywhere, Clifton Cannon, who is Executive Board Member of IBLCE, and also Saray Hill, who is Director of Promotion and Advancement for the Americas and Israel, and is also a part of IBLCE. So I want to give everyone a warm welcome. So we can start. You can share your screen, Saray.
I'm having a little bit of technical issues. Give me just 1 second.
Okay, that's okay. You should be able to share now.
So Ms. Brenda, this is Clifton. I actually have the presentation and I'm going to share it from me.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. I am Clifton Keenan, fully adorned in my college sweatsuit. Very proud to have graduated from a historically Black college, the University, Winston-Salem State University. And I certainly want to extend applause to all of you for being here tonight to get this information. Perhaps you are interested or currently on the pathway. And you certainly are to be applauded for doing something so worthwhile that really will has the potential to have impact in your community. IBLCE wishes to thank HealthConnect One and their partners for inviting us to do this presentation, as well as other partners and stakeholders in the lactation community, Reaching Our Sisters Everywhere. In all of your respective organizations. We are very thankful to be here. I'm Clifton Keenan, as Ms. Brenda so eloquently pointed out. By way of education, I have doctoral education in nursing, and I am an IBCLC, having been one for over 10 years, and my clinical practice is hospital and community, and my specialty is around helping families manage supply and induced and relactation. So with that being said, I'm going to share a presentation about the pathways to become an IBCLC. And we're going to talk about the organization, and we're going to talk about the different options. My fabulous colleagues are going to be helping me as we field questions. I would prefer if you ask questions throughout the presentation so we can sort of talk about topics as we go along. And Saray, who is also on the line, is the regional director or the director for promotion and advancement in Americas, North and South America, as well as Israel. She is our content expert on some of the specificities of becoming a lactation consultant. The final thing that I would say is that Saray and I are here. We are not being paid. We are here as volunteers of the organization. Any honoraria that HealthConnect 1 would extend, we would repurpose to other charitable entities. That being said, we do not have the ability to answer any very specific questions about your specific circumstances, and we would prefer generalized questions. So if you have a case open or you have applied for the exam, we won't be able to talk specifically about some of those intricate details, but we certainly invite a multitude of other general questions. So we have a very clean house. All the housekeeping is open and done. So let's get started. Once again, welcome everyone. And I'm going to share now. Okay. Can I get a screen check? Are we all good, colleagues?
You're good.
You're good.
Okay. Thank you. So the title of this presentation is Demystifying the IBCLC Requirements. And that's exactly what we aim to do. Once again, as a reminder, I want you to be reminded that you are invited to ask questions as we go along. And let's just jump right in. I'm trying to figure out where to put the lovely pictures of my colleagues. I don't want to lose them, but I also need to see the full screen. All right, let's do that. So IBLCE, often used interchangeably with IBCLC, are actually two different things. IBLCE is the organization, the International Board of Lactation Consultant Examiners. The certification of the credential is the International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. And from this point on in the presentation, we will refer to the IBCLC, International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, just with the acronym. Currently, IBCLCs exist in numbers that range over 31,000 and in over 110 countries. On our board of directors, we have directors living in 6 different countries, but we have directors that are living in countries that they did not grow up in or they've practiced in other countries and they're doing different professional work around the world. So that number actually even increases when we talk about individuals' geographic origin and nationality. Our board directors can be viewed on the IBLCE website, and you can see it's a pretty diverse group, recognizing that there is never a platinum level of diversity, and there's always room for improvement and always room to re-envision diversity in diverse ways. So the IBCLC program, we don't just hand out a certificate. The certificate is credentialed by the NCCA, and you can look that up. And you can see what our credentialing status is, if there have been any issues, and what our standing is. The IBCLC certification is voluntary. It's not one that is required. It's not one that is bound in international legislation, though there is some regional and local legislation around the world, even within the United States, that speak to certification. But overall, it's a voluntary certification. And these 3 basic characteristics make up why this is voluntary and how we get our accreditation. The eligibility criteria is clearly articulated, which we're going to try to demystify a little bit more tonight. There is an exam, and then there are ethical components of maintaining the certification as well as practicing within the guidelines of the certification. Certification programs serve the public. They do not serve the IBCLC or the provider. They are put in place as a protection mechanism to the actual public, which is the primary stakeholder. Certifications may or may not be recognized for employment. We know that around the world there is diversity and perspective around employment. And we're not going to spend a lot of time with that, but you may find that some employers require the IBCLC, some do not, some require different iterations of other credentials that you may need to have in certain professional backgrounds. So what are the background of the IBCLCs? Very simple. You need lactation and breastfeeding care clinical hours. You need some education in health science. You need education in lactation specific subjects. And then you need to be able to show competency in the areas presented on the exam. To continue and maintain your competency and licensure, and certification of the exam, it could be licensure depending on which state. For these purposes, it's certification and credentialing. You need to be able to show continued competence, and the way that we evaluate that is through continued education and reexamination. And then finally, you would have to abide by the Code of Professional Conducts, and then you would have to comply with the disciplinary procedures. Next, we're going to go through each one of these tenets and talk a little bit more about them specifically, and then I hope we'll have some questions that we can sort of engage in further conversation. But at this time, I'm going to pause. I'm going to do a sound check. I'm going to do a speed check, and then just an overall technological check. Is everyone able to follow and hear? Is the speed appropriate, and can you see?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
People
Okay.
are typing in the chat box. Click
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like we're all good. If the speed gets too quickly, or if I become a little bit excitable, rein me back in and we'll try to start over, okay? Very good. Thank you all for your responses. So let's talk about the scope of practice. These are the activities that IBCLCs, they're educated in, and the ones that they're authorized to engage in. The scope of practice is a scope that protects the public, and it promotes that IBCLCs are providing care that's safe, is competent, and it's evidence-based. The grandiosity of this scope of practice is that the scope of practice is designed to be one that has an international reach, meaning that a lactation consultant that's practicing in Papua New Guinea is practicing in the same scope of practice, for all intents and purposes, as an IBCLC that's practicing in Tennessee, as an IBCLC that's practicing in Russia, and an IBCL that's practicing in, let's say, Brazil or Bolivia, or in the Maldives or the Seychelles Islands, which I am very happy to go there and see patients. So who should become an IBCLC? The simple answer is those who believe that the IBCLC will be useful to them. It will add something, it will empower them or allow them to serve communities and to really be a servant and helping families and individuals in their lactation, breastfeeding, chest feeding needs all across the diaspora. So anyone with this passion, it can be healthcare professionals and it can be non-healthcare professionals. And the intersection of that is perhaps you are a non-healthcare professional and you become an IBCLC, and then in many places you would be a healthcare professional. So I think it's anyone with a passion for helping families, for helping individuals, for helping communities meet their breastfeeding goals. And I might even go a step further and say individuals that are very interested in doing policy work or doing research, that want to have this background to be better versed, to be able to actually engage in those activities and advance the trajectory of us meeting optimal health around the world. So where do IBCLCs work? I think we all know they work in hospitals, they work in clinics, they work in public health offices, they work in nutritional programs such as the Women, Infant, and Children's, they work in academic settings, they work in public and health policy, they even work in diplomatic relations, they work in research, like I said, they work in academia, they work in parishes, they work in congregations. They work in other nonprofit organizations, and they work in any other entity where there is a platform to do work around breastfeeding, chest feeding, human lactation, and all of the sort of corresponding aspects. So where do lactation consultants work? Where do IBCLCs work? They work essentially all over. Myself, I work community, and I work seeing patients in community as an extension of the healthcare system, but I also use my IBCLC in diplomatic relations in my full-time job, working at USAID in the United States Department of State. So let's talk about the eligibility requirements, okay? We talked earlier about those 6 tenets. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. The first thing is that you need education in specific health science subjects. These specified subjects are generally around 14. There's 14 of them. There's 14 of these core subjects, and you need education there. This can come via the health profession, or it can come based on a pursuit of individual education in those 14 subjects. In addition to that, you need the education in human lactation and breastfeeding. You need 90 hours. And then you have to be able to prove that you have clinical practice and providing care that supports breastfeeding families. This can include lactation education through different pathway options, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. But in a nutshell, you need the health science education, you need your lactation and breastfeeding specific education, and then you need your clinical practice hours, which culminate around this eligibility and allow you to move forward with pursuing the IBCLC credential. So, one of the common myths that we hear is that those that are not healthcare professionals cannot earn the IBCLC. I want to tell you, it's 100% false. I know hundreds, if not thousands of people around the world who are IBCLCs who do not have a healthcare profession background. Now, I know some that became healthcare professions afterwards, but certainly there were many that entered the credential in the profession without having that. Candidates not in an IBCLC recognized health profession, they should review their past education and see if they have courses that meet the requirement, and then seek out ways to take the other courses. And sometimes even healthcare professionals may have to take some of these courses also. So the reality and the truth is that everyone needs those 14 health sciences, and there's a variety of ways that you can get them. My health science education is from more than 5 years ago. So do I need to repeat the course? Absolutely false. This health science education can be taken at any point before you apply for the exam. They do not need to be within the 5 years.
Clifton, there's a question on the chat box for
Okay,
you.
let's take it.
It's from Sabrina Butler, and she's asking, does your CLC courses count as lactation education hours?
So I know the answer to this, but there are some specificities around the way that CERTs are counted. So we're going to have Saray pop on and answer this question.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Clifton. Well, IBLCE does not offer lactation education in any way. We are the certification body that offers the IBCLC examination. So we do not offer CLC courses, but what I can tell you is that all requirements require 90 hours of lactation education. So what I would suggest is that at any lactation education class course that you would take, just sort of check how many hours that course or class gives you, how many hours of lactation specific education you're receiving, and then you can see how many more hours you will need towards the 90 hours that the IBCLC examination requires, or if you are already covered. There might be a lactation education course or class that offers you 120 hours, so you are already 30 hours over the 90 hours that we required. Does that help?
He said, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Saray, for such a wonderful answer. We do want to reiterate that we do not talk specific about specific courses because our scope is international, but the 90 hours is the 90 hours as long as it meets the criteria. So, very good question, and it's one that other people on the call had, so I really appreciate you being the first person to jump in and answer that question and ask that question. All right, let's keep going. We're on a nice little pace here. So let's talk about these health science requirements. If you are educated in one of the following health professions and you can provide evidence that it's recognized as a health profession within the country or the region that you live in, then you meet this requirement. And those health professions are listed on the screen. Noting the abundance of those that exist in allied health, such as dietitians and dentistry, occupational therapy and pharmacy, speech pathology, physical therapy, and of course, you know, we have our nurses and our physicians. There is a growing number of pharmacists who are pursuing the IBCLC. We know across the world that there are pharmacies and minute clinics that are doing prescriptions and medication consults as well as doing lactation. So these are the recognized health professions that meet the health science education requirement. That does not mean that if you're not in one of those professions that you may not have the 14 hours already, okay? Now, of these 14, I'm sorry, it's not hours, it's 14 subjects, I'm sorry, so it's not hours. Of these 14 health science subject requirements, the following 8 has to be earned at an institution of higher learning that's an accredited. So you have your anatomies, your physiologies, your biology, psychology and sociology, or the equivalents that are listed on the screen: counseling, cultural sensitivity, anthropology, clinical research, growth and development, and nutrition. They have to be taken at an institution of higher learning that's accredited within the country that you live in by some accrediting body. So when you look at these 8 subjects, right? So there's just 14 requirements, 8 of these subjects. How do you determine if those 8 that are listed on the screen actually meet the criteria to go forth? The first thing is that it has to be from an accredited institution, and you have to have passed the course. It has to be 1 academic credit session in length. That's a minimum of 25 hours of course time. So if you take a class in the country or the region that you live in, they might be on different systems of grading or credit hours versus semester, credit hours, mini-mester, etc. This is the way that we sort of translate these courses from around the world, and this is how we determine if something meets the criteria. It has to be this minimum of 1 academic credit, which we equate to be 25 hours. Okay, so that means that there was 25 hours that you spent in a course. And it has to be on the subjects listed in the Health Science Education Guide. There is a guide that is available for those interested in taking the exam and those that are going to be recertifying, and it gives more in-depth detail around these specific requirements and some of the idiosyncrasies, because as you can imagine, education is different all around the world, and here in the United States, education can differ significantly, even region to region and state to state. I think we might have another question, so I'm going to pause and see if we do.
Yes, we do, Clifton. We have a comment from Ashley Hunt who asks, can you go back to the courses required page?
Absolutely, we can.
Hello, Ashley. Just quick question. We will let you know that you don't have to write these down. The recording will be available to you, and also Saray is sharing that same information via a link on our chat box that we will also share out after the webinar.
Thank you very much, Ashley. That's a great question. And thank you, Saray, for certainly adding in these pertinent links that draw people to more information. Okay, hold on one second. I have a young lady singing Baby Shark. Journey, Papa is giving a lecture. Papa is giving a lecture.
Why?
Why? Because there's people around the world who want to become lactation consultants, and I think that I want to talk about it with them. So can you not talk real loud? Okay, thank you. I love you. All right. We'll see how long our little pack lasts between my father and daughter dyad here. Thank you all for your sensitivities and patience. And Journey's mom has so graciously saved us now. My lovely wife. All right. So for the remaining 6 subjects, we talked about this number that's 14, right? So we have 8 that have to be taken at these institutions of higher learning. That's your anatomies, your biologies, your anthropologies, psychology, sociologies. But in addition, there are these other 6 subjects, and they may be offered at institutions of higher learning, and they may not. And these are things such as medical documentation and medical terminology, universal safety precautions, and professional ethics for health professionals. All right. Now, that was a lot of information, so I want to pause again. Are there questions about the 14 health sciences, recognizing that 8 of them have to come from institutions of higher learning? The other 6 may or may not, and they are different in how you can get them, but the 8 have to come, and they have to meet those criteria around being the 25 hours and it being accredited. The other 6, there's a little bit more flexibility. That being said, are there questions specifically before we move on? Because this is very important.
There's a question from Sabrina Butler again. She is saying in the chat box, I work at a hospital and we take the 6 courses listed. Does that count?
So the answer to that, and Saray, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it certainly could count. So we know that many hospitals and organizations give basic life support. They give universal safety precautions and infection control. You would need to have the documentation of that. You would submit that with your package. But I'm going to let Saray speak a little bit more to that.
Hi, Clifton, you're absolutely right. Yes, you could do that. And what I will strongly suggest everyone who is in the pathway to becoming an IBCLC to please have all your documentation ready, handy, when you're applying, because there might be the possibility that you're picked up for an audit, and then you will have to send all this documentation in to be able to prove that you have completed these courses.
So thank you, Sabrina. That's a very good question. And, you know, for individuals that are able to get these courses through their employer without charge, it's a very good way to go.
There's another question. There's a comment from Janelle that says we have to take occupational safety. Sabrina says, thank you very much. Let me see here. Oh, a question from Angelica Deoleo. Are labs required for anatomy and physiology?
So that's a good question. Anatomy and physiology is different all around the world. If your courses meet the requirements that we outlined around, they have to have minimum of 25 hours, and they are from an accredited institution. That is the criteria that we look at. Saray, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, sorry, I'm playing with the mute and unmute button. No, that's absolutely correct. And I also would like to encourage everyone, because for the reasons that Clifton outlined, there is a variation from region to region. So we definitely have our customer service team available for you all to contact them and get more specifics into these questions. You can call the office. You will have a live person answering the phone and be able to answer your question right then. We also have email that you can, most people like to contact us by email. So please do that and you will have your answer within at the latest 48 hours. So this is not just the only information that you are going to receive. You also have our office and you also have our website and the guides that we have provided. And I have shared the links in the chat box. So if you would like to go and check on all those specifics, you have that to reference to.
Thank you, Saray. I want to reiterate this page right here because this is what we look for in the eight subjects. If it comes from an accredited institution, you obtained a passing grade, and it was a minimum of 1 academic credit session in length, which is 25 hours. And then the content, this is where I want to go back and stress. The content must be on the subjects listed in the Health Science Education Guide. That should help clarify if the course that you're taking actually will meet the requirement. And the reason we're hesitant to answer if it needs a lab or not, because lab-based education looks very different all around the world. But these are excellent questions. Okay, now let's jump into some more myth busters. Lactation-specific education, this is a myth buster. Lactation-specific education can be taken anytime before I sit the exam. Now, this is different than the health science education. This cannot be taken anytime before you take the exam. False. You have to have completed the 90 hours at the time of submitting the application. This is typically 5 months before the exam, okay? So if you apply for the exam and you don't have the 90 hours and you say, well, I'm going to get them before, this is false. You have to have the 90 hours submitted with the application, okay? Does that make sense to everyone? Because we don't want someone to do all of this stuff and then get tripped up.
So Clifton, just to clarify, just to make sure I'm understanding, if I apply tomorrow to go sit for my IBCLC exam, which I'm taking in October. I'm going to sit for it in October and I apply tomorrow. I need to have all my 90 hours of lactation education.
That is correct. And Saray, I'm going to ask you to co-sign that.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. You have to have everything ready to go. And your 90 hours of lactation education within the past 5 years prior to sitting the exam, applying for the exam, excuse me. Then you have your health educations, and then you have your clinical practice component that we will talk about it in a little bit further into the presentation. And this reason being, you could be picked out to be audited. And you need to show us proof of all these things that have been completed, okay?
So Brenda, let's just recap because this is a lot of information. It's a little bit confusing. Health science education does not have to be within the last 5 years. The lactation specific education does have to be, and they all, the health science and the lactation specific education all have to be completed at the time of application. The difference is that the health science education does not have to be within the last 5 years. Does that sort of help to sort of clarify? Because I know it's really confusing with some of the idiosyncrasies. Okay. Thank you for your question, Ms. Brenda. I must take one 90-hour course to meet this requirement. So that's a huge myth. Even though there are 90-hour courses that are available, we won't speak to any of those specifically, but if you can build together the 90 hours that meets your 90 hours. You do not have to take one course to get the 90 hours, but you can if that's what you choose to do, okay? We encourage you to take education specific to what is on the detailed content outline. What is on the detailed content outline is what is on the exam. So we would encourage you to take your education that follows somewhat that detailed content outline, okay? So that's why it's there for you. It's not a secret. It's there for you to review, and you can piece together your courses based on that, or you can take, multiple courses that you receive multiple hours for at one time, even including a 90-hour course. Let's talk a little bit about these lactation-specific education. We already jumped in and let the cat out of the bag a little bit. It does have to be completed within the last 5 years from when you apply. You can get these at conferences. You can get them online. You can get them in classroom educations. You can also get them as a part of a Pathway 2 academic program, as long as it's verified by IBCLC. Okay? These 90 hours have to be in human lactation and breastfeeding. Now, let's go over this one more time. It has to be within 5 years. You can obtain them in a variety of ways. You can get a bunch at one time. You can get all of them at one time. You could do one at a time, pick up some at conferences, some online. You can piece it together as long as it meets the criteria of this 90 hours. And to come up with the 90 hours, we determined that 1 hour is equal to 60 minutes. So you actually need the 90 hours of the actual education. And then finally, of course, this can also be done through a Pathway 2 academic program verified by IBCLC. And the Pathway 2 programs are also listed on the website. And hopefully, Saray will be able to put the link to the Pathway 2 accredited programs in the chat box for anyone considering that option.
I will do that. And I just wanted to share that I posted the detailed content outline for everyone. So you're able to see what our exam is about. Let me, I'll find the Pathway 2 programs in a minute.
Thank you. Is everyone finding these resources to be helpful? Is there anything that you would like to see that we aren't talking about? Even if we're ahead of it in the presentation, go ahead and just put it in the chat box, because we really want this to be interactive, and we want you to have the maximum amount of resources so you can be successful.
People are sharing in the chat box, Clifton, very helpful. Yes, this is very helpful information, very much.
Thank you, and thank you again for being here. I know it's prime time in many parts of the United States. So let's talk about the clinical practice. We've talked about the health sciences education. We've talked about the lactation and breastfeeding education that's required. Now let's talk about clinical practice. Mythbuster. I can count my time observing IBCLCs as part of the clinical hours. So that's false. You can't count observation time towards your clinical hours. They actually have to be actual clinical hours where you are actually practicing. It certainly can be under the supervision or the guidance of an IBCLC, but you cannot account for hours just from shadowing or observing someone actually practice as an IBCLC. So let's talk about what the requirements actually are. Now, you probably know that there's 3 pathways: Pathway 1, Pathway 2, and Pathway 3. This is where the clinical requirements get a little bit more specific. If you are on Pathway 1, you need 1,000 hours obtained in a supervised setting, okay? If you're on Pathway 2, you're in one of the accredited and verified programs, and those programs have the 300 hours of directly supervised lactation clinical experience. This is part of an academic program. And then Pathway 3 is where you obtain 500 hours under the supervision. This is direct supervision of an IBCLC. And you have to have these plans verified, and IBCLC will verify them prior to you earning the clinical hours. Okay, so Pathway 3 will include an application fee. one of the things that we so commonly hear is that pathway 1 is the pathway for healthcare professionals, but pathway 1 is the pathway for anyone that meets the criteria for pathway 1, as well as any of the other pathways. So I want to pause here and kind of let people see the screen and sort of think through, because there's a lot of information that looks somewhat simplified, but it's really important, and it gives a snapshot into our 3 pathways of which one can pursue the journey to become an IBCLC. But we do want to pause just yet again and see if there's any questions about this, because I find the questions are actually very helpful, even for other people that may not be asking.
Clifton, yes, we have 2 questions in our chat box. There's one from Janelle Hughes Jones, who's saying, does supervised mean I help patients with an IBCLC in the room, or just where I can go to them with questions? Do you want to address that one, and then I'll read the other one?
We do want to address that one. Saray, if we could address this through the lens of differentiating between pathway 1 and pathway 2 hours, I think that will answer the question.
Sure. That is a great question. I think that came as to how requirements were probably about 10 years ago. So we do have to update our requirements every so often. So I want to say about 2011, that was prior Clifton and I being able to see, those requirements change. So what we now require as far as supervision is a supervised setting. And we have defined what a supervised setting means. And that is a hospital, a clinic, a birth center, somewhere where there is some type of supervision. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be an IBCLC being with you, seeing every patient that you go into and see. It's a supervised setting. And in the guide, we provide specifics as to what those settings are. And out of the top of my mind, what comes to mind is like the hospital, the birth center, clinics. And in relation to pathway 2, as Clifton was pointing out, that means that with the pathway 2, it's a different setting, right? It's a different pathway. So this is a university, institution, an educational institution that has come up with these different ways of providing those clinical settings for their students to go do those clinical practice hours. So that is the difference between pathway 1, pathway 2. Pathway 1, you need to be in a supervised setting, not having necessarily a supervisor going with you to every patient or every consult that you do. And while pathway 2 is more about these pathway 2 programs that have already established everything that is needed to meet the supervised setting criteria. Does that make sense?
And then pathway 3, you have to be under the direct supervision of an IBCLC.
Because that's a mentorship.
Quite different, because pathway 3 is what we call the mentorship pathway.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. What I want to reiterate in pathway 1 is that, so for example, you couldn't just get all of your hours by hosting support groups at your home or seeing patients independently in a community. So, you would have to be in a supervised setting, which is for pathway 3, which is where you have to be working directly under an IBCLC, and they are supervising you. And that's how we differentiate pathway 1, 2, and 3. It has to do with the supervision and the setting that you're in. So that's a very good question. Does that answer the question? If we could get a response, Ms. Brenda, from the question asker before we go on to question 2, because it's such an important question.
I'm not getting a response in the chat box per se. Let me see. I don't see anything yet. They're saying this is kind. It did answer the question. And then there's another question that says, okay, pathway 3. There's a separate form to confirm you have someone that will supervise your hours.
I'm sorry, could we ask that question again?
It say, okay, pathway 3, There is a separate form to confirm you have someone that will supervise your hours. So I guess she's asking about pathway 3 and how will your hours will be confirmed. I guess she's asking whether someone
Okay.
will, you know, supervise, or how will that happen?
So pathway 3 is what we call our mentorship pathway. And when you embark upon pathway 3, you will submit a plan. And that plan has to be verified by IBCLC prior to you earning the clinical hours. That way people don't just go out and earn the clinical hours and then have to find out, well, these really were not acceptable. So the plan is validated, and as long as you're working under that mentor, those hours are then validated and signed off by the mentor, the person that's directly supervising you.
Great. And then there's another question. Do we have to find an IBCLC ourselves willing to supervise and make a plan with the IBCLC?
So the answer to that question is you either have to find a structure or a platform that can put you in contact with someone, or you can find someone individually. Around the world, there are different resources to pair people and do mentorship, but that's not something that we do at IBCLC, is sort of pick mentors, but there are many organizations worldwide that do have directories, and they have information for people and how they can actually be paired to a mentor. Saray, I believe I answered that correctly.
Correct. Yes. So unfortunately, IBCLC is not able to pick a mentor for you. You will have to find that IBCLC, and as Clifton mentioned, there are many resources worldwide. You can check your Breastfeeding Coalition, your there's other organizations such as ILCA or USLCA who have directories for mentors. So if you can get in contact with someone that you know, a friend, that will be how you will find that person and then submit the plan to IBLCE to verify and then start earning your hours with that mentor.
Very good questions. So these are the appropriate supervised settings: hospitals, clinics, birth center, primary care, midwifery. Because this is an international presentation, the English is British English. So sometimes you see where the English is a little different than American English, but this allows us to use a presentation worldwide. Now, on to the exam. The exam is 4 hours. It's separated into 2 parts. Within those 2 parts, there are sections that there are images. It's 175 questions. It's offered in April and October. We don't say the spring and the fall because it's different all around the world. And in October, the exam is delivered in 17 languages. In April, the exam is only delivered in English. You would go to one of the Pearson VUE testing centers. You can go anywhere in the world. There is a testing center. And the exam, if you take it in English, is in the British English, UK English, and then you can get your results within 2 to 3 months. The exam is scheduled 4 months in advance. Okay, I want to pause and see if there are questions around this preliminary content that we did with the exam. Some of you may remember the exam historically was offered once a year, and now it's offered twice. But the April exam, for our purposes in America, the spring exam, is only offered in English. After you successfully become certified as an IBCLC, you must recertify. And you recertify every 5 years. And at the first 5-year mark, you can certify either by taking the exam again, or you certify by competency validation, which is validated through continuing education credits specific to lactation. After 10 years, you must recertify by taking the exam. Now, someone is going to ask, they've heard rumors that this is going away and this is going to change. We are not here. We cannot confirm nor deny what the future will hold. As it is now, and all we know at this point is that recertification by exam in 10 years is what the guidelines state. Okay. Are there any questions about the exam? Exam offered twice a year in English. In October, it's offered in 17 languages or 16 other languages outside of English. You recertify every 5 years. The first 5 years, you can do exam or CERT, continuing education. At the 10-year mark, you would need to recertify by examination. Okay, here's a table. This is very helpful. It's in one of the candidate guides, but this is a great snapshot to have after you've taken the exam and look at recertification. So remember, it takes 90 hours of lactation education to sit for the exam. If you recertify by CERT, it's required that you have 75 continuing educations. 50 of those have to be specific to lactation. 5 have to be specific to ethics. The remaining 20 can come from any topic that's related on the lactation consultant profession in the detailed content outline. So they can be LCERPs, they can be ECERPs, or they can be RCERPs. So you could get 70 LCERPs and 5 ECERPs, okay? You could get 50 LCERPs, 20 RCERPs, 5 ECERPs. But the 55 have to be accounted for. 5 have to be ECERPs and 50 have to be LCERPs. The LCERPs are lactation specific and 5 is related to ethics. The other 20 you can make up in any way with an L, an E, or an RCERP. Now, Saray has outlined many of these wonderful documents in the chat box, but these are very informative documents that give more information around the process, around recertifying, and around practicing as an IBCLC. The IBCLC website has had major improvements over the years, and we believe that it's more user-friendly than ever. There was a major rehaul of the website done within the last couple of years, and there's constant updates all the time. But IBCLC always invites stakeholders to submit feedback if the website is not working for you. Because remember, it's set up to be easy for people to be able to utilize and find the information that they need. We do recognize that maybe it hasn't always been as user-friendly as it needed to be, and therefore we've adjusted accordingly, recognizing that there is always room for improvement in every single aspect, even after we've done these major overhauls. So how do you apply for the exam? Okay, the English applications are available online. You create an account and you can apply the English application. The translated applications are available through online form, okay? So we do an auditing process, meaning that if you are selected for audit, then they will audit and review your materials. Really important to follow the deadlines, which are posted on the IBCLC website. And then you will receive an email to schedule the exam appointment. This will be an email. So check your email, your inbox, your spam box, everything, because you will get this email to schedule the exam. And then within this information guide, we have the fees and what it costs to apply and sit for the exam to become an IBCLC, as well as what it would cost to recertify. This is the website, IBCLC.org. And how does IBCLC support IBCLCs? We go to a lot of conferences and tell the story. We're involved in many national and international breastfeeding groups, such as United States Breastfeeding Committee, the International Lactation Consultants Association, United States Lactation Consultant Association, and our board members and staff are in a wide variety of other organizations. Like myself, for example, I'm a part of NAPLC and ROSE and ROBE, USLCA, USBC, and so forth. So IBCLC has that presence, and then IBCLC uses part of their funds to support the Milk Scholarship Program. This is the contact for the IBCLC office. One of the things that we are incredibly proud of is that when you call the IBCLC office, you do not get an automated response. You get a real live person, okay? On the staff at IBCLC, I think there is at least 13 different in-house languages that are spoken within the staff, okay? And our worldwide offices in America is in Virginia, and the Europe and the Middle East, we're in Austria, and then in Asia Pacific and Africa, we are in Queensland, Australia. All of this information will be made available to you. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. I want to thank you all for your outstanding attention. I want to again thank my colleagues, Andrea and my dear colleagues at HealthConnect 1, and Saray for being so gracious as to lend her expertise within her role as the Director of Promotion and Advancement. And then most of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for your aspirations. And certainly I want to honor every single family that has ever trusted care to a lactation professional and an IBCLC to help them in perhaps one of the most vulnerable times in their life. I'm Clifton Keenan, and I'm an IBCLC, and I am happy to have presented this presentation tonight. That completes our presentation from my part, and I'm going to transition it back to Ms. Brenda Reyes at HealthConnect 1 if there are no other questions.
I do have a question. One question before you
Okay, absolutely.
This is in relation to the pathways. I know IBCLC has a list of mother support council organizations that they identify as bases. Now, when a person goes to one of those recognized organizations, is that following under pathway 1 for their hours, or is that going under pathway 3?
Saray, I know.
I can answer. Yeah, I can answer that.
That
Sure, absolutely. And my kid is over here, so if you hear something, please excuse me. I'm telling her, please be quiet. So hope she follows through. But yes, you are absolutely right. We have the what we call the breastfeeding support counselor organizations. These are also organizations worldwide, and the way this works is they fall under pathway 1. So they need to complete 1,000 hours. However, at this moment, how things are, they get what we call a flat rate for a clinical practice hours. So if they are primarily doing what I would say phone counseling or some nothing that is primarily face-to-face interaction, they will get a 250 hour per year flat rate.
Yes.
If the counselors are doing that in addition to face-to-face counseling, they will get a 500 hour per year flat rate, a 500 flat rate, 500 hours flat rate per full time of volunteering with such organization. Now, these organizations have to be recognized by IBCLC, and the way that works is that they need to submit an application, they get reviewed, and then they get a letter from us letting them know that they are officially part of this list of breastfeeding support organizations, or if we need additional information, we will let them know and they will submit that and we will review them. So yes, that's a great question. They fall under pathway 1. They need 1,000 hours, but depending on the type of counseling they are doing, it will be a 250 hour flat rate per whole year of volunteerism, or 500. Depending on the type of volunteering they do. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfect. And so that's on the list of organizations on the website.
Correct. there is, and I can find that link real quick and post it as well. But all of these is on our website, absolutely. I think I just found it, so I'm gonna post it right now. Oops, no, that's not it. But I will post it real quick. That was the wrong. That was the health professions. 1 second. I will post it right there.
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Clifton and Saray, for presenting this information. I want to be respectful of people's time. I do want to end just with one question. We're getting positive feedback on our chat. People are saying, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. Thank you for doing this. I work at a hospital and see patients in the clinic, hospital, labor and delivery, and teach the breastfeeding classes. How much would I earn after a year? She's asking a follow-up question. I will also make sure that any questions that are coming, that I will send them to Saray and Clifton. But I want to end just, people, where can, Andrea, I know you sat for the exam recently. I don't know if you can share maybe some resources with people, or in order to prepare for the exam, or where can they go for support? Any wisdom, last minute words that you can share with participants, I think they would greatly appreciate it, and we can close with that.
Okay, definitely. And I promise I'm not going to keep it long because I know it's after the time. I will definitely recommend, and one, before I say this, any of the things I'm about to say are not promoted, or support, or, anything representing IBCLC. This is all my personal input here. So just want to go ahead and give that caveat. But I definitely recommend looking into any of your breastfeeding coalitions, whether they're local or state, to see if they're offering scholarships, and find out if they're offering a scholarship, for a course that will help you get the lactation specific hours, or specifically for the exam, right? So you'll see things about IBCLC scholarships. Just make sure you're understanding what type of scholarship they're providing, whether it's for going to a course or whether it's for the exam. When it comes to getting the hours, as stated, conferences, online coursework, in person are all available. Conferences are excellent places, and make sure you keep your certificates. As soon as you leave the certificate, take a picture of your certificate. They run away, and these are the things you'll need if you get audited after you apply for the exam. So if you have a picture of it and the certificate ran away, at least you have that copy of it. When it comes to the coursework or taking IBCLC prep courses, these things are helpful in giving you targeted information that falls in line with what was posted earlier about, I just want to make sure I'm giving the detailed content outline. A lot of the courses that are offered for your lactation specific hours try to be in line with that detailed content outline that was sent earlier. So that's what's helpful about taking the IBCLC prep course, is that the information you receive there should fall in line with what you'll see for the exam. And they're offered in many different capacities, many organizations that are out there do them, like Lactation Education Resources. Rose does some, and I don't want to miss out on any, but there's a lot of different available resources to be able to try to take those coursework. So I think I saw a question about certificates. Oh, no, okay. And the other thing is that, when you're preparing for a test day, a lot of people get real anxious, and they're going to say, I'm going to take it this October. Breathe, give yourself a moment, identify what are some of the things you already have completed, and and it's okay if the test date has to move forward to like October next year, to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. because at the end of the day, you don't want to be overly anxious. If anyone's like me, I get test anxiety sometimes. So giving myself that time to prepare for the exam, I think I gave myself about a year to prepare for the exam with information. So when I sat down, I took a lot of practice exams. Take as many practice exams as you can to help get over some of the test anxiety and kind of just getting used to the question structure. So that way you can focus on what the question is asking you, not necessarily how it's set up. So those are my quick tips. I hope they were helpful.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing those resources. Again, I want to thank Saray Hill and Clifton Cannon from IBCLC for joining us tonight. And I want to thank all the participants. Thank you for participating. Thank you for all your questions. We'll follow up with a recording of the webinar and also with all the links and the resources that Saray and Clifton provided regarding this credential and sitting for this exam. Thank you very much, and have a good night. Buenas noches, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.